I am so conservative.
Rationalized in my head. These are things I read in
And
the
I'm going to talk about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had invited.
Remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah.
I am so conservative. If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative. And welcome to the Unknown Webcast. Today is July 13, 2021, and this is broadcast number 248. Our regular viewers are keenly aware that I am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving. Not only do we give these trigger warnings to our viewers, but Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection. Today, Dr. Phil Roberts and Pastor James Pittman join us to ask the question, is CRT the SBC golden calf? My name is Don Vino, and I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie Baby.
Hey, greetings from sunny Florida. I almost hit the leave studio button just a second ago. That would have been embarrassing. Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm trees came out, saw their shadows, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is the Grievance Industrial Complex, because things are never bad enough already. The Grievance Industrial Complex. And our regular legal disclaimer, our guest or guests on today's webcast insert names here. Pastor Pittman and Phil Roberts have no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. This satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinion regarding this satirical content. That's straight from our legal advisors at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Notice the opinions expressed on this webcast are ours and should be yours too if you enjoy this webcast, or you just want to inflict it on someone else because it annoys you. To ensure your continued access, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. So I was going to say something really smart, and then I forgot what I was going to say. Something about, trigger warnings and how we should have the sound of a gun going off when you talk about them, something like that. But
well, by the way, Phil, you'll appreciate this. David Van Beber has this delusion that we are scholars that will be speaking on this outstanding topic.
Yeah. Poor Dave. Well, Dave's a great guy. He's very generous.
He is generous. He's kind to us in spite of knowing us personally.
Yeah. Well,
so,
his capacity is only exceeded by his lack of perception. He's a smart guy too.
So not only are you not gentlemen, but you're not scholars.
Yeah, well, I'm not gonna speak for them, but I can only speak for me. I am neither a gentleman nor a scholar. I'm just an old fat guy doing the best I can with what I got.
That guy said, "That's no lady, that's my wife." Okay.
That's my wife. Yeah. Actually, I spoke this past Sunday on at a Calvary Chapel, and my topic was false teaching invading the church as well as culture, because it's capturing cultural attention, and churches are responding and embracing some of this stuff. And it was on two groups that don't have directly the same theology, but are sort of a symbiotic relationship. That's hashtag BLM and critical race theory. Now, BLM started in 2013. It's actually an occult religion, Odu Ifa. We've done an article on that and spoke about it on a webcast a couple of weeks ago. Whereas critical race theory comes out of academia. Robin DiAngelo's book came out in 2019, small publisher. Did not get a lot of traction until this interesting event happened. Tragic and interesting, George Floyd's death in 2020, which then did two things. It caused hashtag BLM to go straight to the front of the line for all things racially understood, let's say. And Robin DiAngelo's book became a #1 bestseller. Just prior to that, in 2019, the Southern Baptist Convention also adopted critical race theory as what they claimed was, quote, a useful tool, end quote. Now, in this past annual meeting, they're not actually called a convention, it's an annual meeting for the Southern Baptist Convention. There were at least, as I understand it, and you two are both Southern Baptist, Pastor Pittman and Dr. Roberts, there were about 40 propositions or proposals, propositions to remove critical race theory from Southern Baptist life, let's say. None of them, it occurs to me, because I was there right along with you, made it to the resolutions committee or stage, as far as I can tell. Tom Askell from the floor made a motion, Pastor Tom Askell, to remove critical race theory from the Southern Baptist statements. He was ruled out of order. So my question to you two individuals, maybe you have an answer or maybe you don't. Why is critical race theory a sacred cow for Southern Baptist Convention?
James, go ahead.
Okay, my opinion. Why is it a sacred cow? What specifically? Because I think it's clear from what happened. It's not a sacred cow to about half of the messengers that was sent there.
Okay.
It's a sacred cow to the academia.
I need to stop you 1 second. What's a messenger for those who are unfamiliar with Southern Baptist lingo? Each
cooperating church gets to send messengers. There's a formula that's made out. One, how much cooperative was how much money was given to a cooperative program, and two, the size of the church comes up with a formula which allow the church, depending on size and money given, to send anywhere between 2 to 12 messengers. That way, the mega churches will have more votes than the rural churches with 2 members. And so those messengers then go to the convention floor, and it acts as a, what do you want to call it, a convention. We call it a convention or a Congress, and the votes are tallied, and the majority wins. So the whole Mike Stone, Ed Litton thing was pretty much broken up between 52% against 47%, roughly.
Okay, so who's Mike Stone and Ed Litton?
Mike Stone was the, I would want to say, anti-sacred cow for our purposes.
Yeah.
And Litton was the pro-sacred cow, which is CRT.
Yeah.
So I would say 52%. You could say that's 52%. But hey, according to everything I've seen, they won the 52%. So
yeah, it was 52%, but it was about 300 votes, I think.
300 to 400 votes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the final vote. The SBC is a fellowship of churches. It's not a denomination as much as the fellowship. Every church participates voluntarily. The exec committee, convention headquarters, has no jurisdiction over a church to tell them
individual church, correct,
they or give. You only have to give, I think, $250 to qualify to be a part of the SBC, but you do have to be Baptistic in your church polity, baptism, and so forth, or you'll be excommunicated by the local association or even by the national convention and not allowed to be seated at the convention. You could be challenged. We have a credentials committee at the convention that reviews every messenger's credentials to make sure their church is participating and involved in the SBC. But it's a big brouhaha. You know, a lot of people don't realize that everything's on the table. All the business that matters is conducted there in terms of the president, election of the president, which is very critical because he then chooses the committee that chooses the nominations for trustees. And starting back in 1979, when the SBC was on the left side and moving rapidly that direction theologically, that's what turned the tide for the SBC, was getting control of that presidential leadership so that the president could then appoint a very conservative committee on committees that could then eventually knock it out to the individual committees appointing trustees for the agencies and appoint conservatives to the board. So that's what turned the tide for the SBC over the course of 20 years or so.
Yeah. David Van Beber, I want to raise this up because he makes a good point. That it's a very sad day for the SBC when 6 seminary presidents can renounce CRT and the convention as a whole cannot. Why do the men on the stage fear denouncing CRT? See, that's the question. Why do they fear denouncing CRT? What is going on there?
First of all, that statement I think was somewhat not accurate in the first place.
Okay.
6 seminary presidents denounce after they've taught it in their seminaries for the past 10 years. No. I think they're referring to the article that was written by the 6 seminary presidents last fall denouncing it. But that was after they had taught it for 10 years in their seminaries. And they were pushing, again, Akins, I believe, was president of Southeastern, was pushing Ed Linton for president. We've got the tweet when it came down to Stone and Linton. It seems as though Aiken, who's president, I think he's president of Southeastern, put out a text to his followers, his minions, to push Ed Linton. So I think there's a little bit of double talk going on there. People who fall behind Mike Stone, who fell behind Mike Stone, recognize that there was some double talk going on between the seminary presidents. So the reason why they did not denounce it from the stage was because the powers behind them not denouncing it were the seminary professors. So there was some that's my take on it, Phil. What's yours? I mean, what did you?
You go back to 2019 when the first resolution came out. If you look at the history of that, Vodi Bakum has a very good recounting of it. In fact, he includes the original anti-CRT resolution of 2019 in the book in toto. It's about a 3-page resolution. That resolution 2019 goes to the committee. The committee rewrites it.
Yep.
And it comes out basically positive. Well, you know, we don't agree with all CRT, but this is a good tool for
analytical tool
research and all this kind of thing. It comes to the floor of the convention. The last thing of business in 2019, people criticize Al Mohler because he didn't speak against it. And then Al said, well, one of my faculty members was chairman of the resolution committee. I'm not going to chastise him publicly or speak against him. So it passed. And that was in the hopper for 2 years. And so this year there was a wave of concern about CRT, and the resolutions came in full and furious, including one I signed on to with about 25 original signatories.
Carol Swain signed on to it.
Carol Swain was one of the original signatories. I talked to her about it before it came out and discussed the matter with her, and she was 100% on board. She was there, by the way, to speak in favor of a resolution denouncing CRT. That resolution, several others, went to the committee. The committee rewrote them. And this was after, as James pointed out, the seminary presidents had a statement basically authored by Al Mohler, as I understand it, from last fall, against CRT. All right. That it was a good statement. I would have supported the statement.
Yeah.
If anything else was gone, the statement was fine. It was great.
Yeah.
But that got a backlash of criticism from African American pastors in the SBC.
Yes.
Some of whom said, we're leaving the convention over this. And some of them, few of them, a handful or maybe less, did leave the convention, supposedly. And others threatened to. So that put the fear of potential exit into the heart of the resolutions committee, who then said, okay, we can't mention CRT by name. We'll talk about theory. We'll criticize any theory that does not say that the original sin is at the heart of the human predicament and the human problem. So that's what they did, any theory. But the question was raised, well, why are we so concerned about CRT? That was my question. Why is it that a theory that is so obviously biblical, anti-biblical, anti-God, anti-sports and anti-faith worldview, anti-Christian worldview, why is it that we're afraid to even mention it, discuss it, or debate it? And that's what I've caught a little flack for over the last few weeks since the convention, since I made that statement. Has been published around and on the internet a bit and all this kind of thing. I've got the chairman of the resolution committee, James Merritt, who's a 40-year acquaintance, friend of mine in ministry. We've done mission trips, and I preached for him in his church, and he preached for me when I was the president of Midwestern Seminary. You know, we've texted back and forth over the issue, and that's still the question I don't have an answer to. I did ask Vodi Bakum. I saw Vodi at the National Religious Broadcast with me, and I said, Vodi, why is CRT a sacred cow to evangelical Baptist pastors, albeit African-American black pastors? He said, because, and his take on it was, and you can see this in his book, Fault Lines, he basically said, if it's anything to do with blackness, then any criticism of it is considered to be racist.
Sounds like an idol to me.
Well, that's my question, James. You can speak from that side of the agenda far better.
It's an idol. It's an idol. If you have something by which everything else has to bend to,
Yeah.
that seems like that is the very definition of an idol to me.
Thank you. And would you say there's something even more basic at work here? There's an idol behind the idol, or an idol supporting the idol. It seems that our culture is idolizing victim status now. In any, whether the victimization happened centuries ago or whether it's happening today. So or maybe another way to look at it is we have a collection of idols. Okay, so you have intersectionality idols because these are different ways you can be a victim. You know, you have women and however they've been victimized as a gender, allegedly. Does that make sense?
It does, sure, because you can elevate that to being the point of this is the only thing that really matters, and then it becomes embellished upon along the way to kind of make it more central to your thinking as a believer than even the gospel is.
Yeah, like we have a group in the PCA who is so concerned about alienating LGBT people, and one of the things they mentioned is their victimization. You know, how they've been victimized by the church and by society. We hear this over and over and over again. And okay,
but here's my problem with that. You're assuming the dictionary they are using to determine what's victimization is an accurate dictionary. So as you and I talk about this all the time, if you don't have the right dictionary, you're not communicating.
Yeah,
that's true.
James, going back to this issue, is this the right perspective? What was explained to me, anything that is considered to be pro-black if you're against it, you're a racist, even if it's a wrongly conceived theory or notion or concept. Is that is it fair to say? Is that why CRT is considered a sacred cow?
Well, you're about to get me in trouble there.
Well, I hope
but that's okay. That's okay.
Better
that's
you
okay.
than us because you're the right color. So
that's okay. That's okay. So
right.
so here,
we're on the outside looking in. You're on the inside, brother.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I never. So when I'm looking at this and doing our YouTube channel forced me to look into what is going on a more national level. Because before then, I was just so engulfed what was going on in our church. I didn't know what was going on outside of our four walls. But when I first started to look at critical race theory, I was dumbfounded that people were falling for this because it's not even a good con to me.
Yeah.
Are you a black Christian or are you a Christian who is black?
Right.
Oh,
you see,
question,
and when you put the blackness before any of that,
right?
If you put German, Irish, Anglo, whatever before Christianity, then you're now going to interpret the scriptures with all things being black must be affirmed.
Right.
That's an idol. It's not even a good con. It's a different gospel. And as far as the victimization goes on, you have that. But don't tell me LeBron James thinks he's a victim. I don't believe that. I don't believe he believes that. I don't think anybody else believes that.
Kenemy posits it becomes a worldview philosophy hermeneutic, which is what you're saying, James. When you put black in front of Christian, French, German, doesn't matter.
Yes. Yes.
Now your hermeneutic has changed because it's based on your worldview, not on scripture.
Exactly. And I don't understand how you can read the scriptures, understand Paul when he's saying, look, tribe of Benjamin, circumcised the 8th day as a Jew of Pharisees. He's taking all his culture and says it's done. It's caca. I mean, well,
caca.
It's poop.
Yep.
Right? It's poop. He takes all of his cultural
scuba.
Create it's bull scuba.
Well, and he throws it out and says no. Right. Well, you have black Christians that are saying, Paul, you're wrong. You're wrong. I'm going to take up my cultural identity and exalt it above the cross. And when you do that, that is a different gospel.
Yeah.
And you're going to read the Bible differently, and you're going to interpret the world and the Bible differently. And you can't embrace critical race theory. You can't. Listen, let me tell you this real quickly. My wife put up something on Facebook talking about BLM when she found out that the BLM, the whole say your name movement, comes out of the occultic practice of calling up spirits.
Right.
When she put that up there, it was a firestorm, mostly from my family. Right. You can't criticize Black Lives Matter. And I said, yes, I can. Yes, we will. And yes, we did. And you can't call yourself a Christian if you are going to support an organization that calls up the dead. You're calling up the dead. It is demonic. It is evil. And I had conversations with a loved one off of Twitter because this erupted on my family. And he basically said, now, I can't, I don't believe in that, but I can't say it publicly.
Yeah.
Because it will diminish the movement.
So Corky asked the question, would you say people's feelings have become the idol and arbiter of truth?
Well, that's in all that's the culture, right?
Yeah.
That's not specific to critical race theory.
Right.
But when it comes to critical race theory, again, it's not even a good con to me. Here's my question. What feelings are actually driving it? There's not a black person alive today in the United States of America that was a slave. Not one. What is it other than what the culture has convinced blacks to accept? And that is, and I talked about this, that is the sense of inferiority.
Yes.
You're inferior. And I can't point to anything today because you have the LeBron James, you have the Oprahs, you have the Michael Jordans, you have the NFL people, you have the NBA. Now, if that's oppression, give me some of that oppression.
Well, wait a minute.
Right?
LeBron James, wasn't he the one who said that being in the NBA was like being treated like a slave?
Yeah, give me some of the slave. That's the type of slavery I want right there. If that's being a slave. What I'm saying is it's so non-logical, it's laughable.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's not even a good con.
Now,
your poster child for oppression is LeBron James, really?
Dr. Roberts, earlier you asked whether anything that's perceived as anti-black is racist. The irony I see is that with critical race theory, anything a white person does that's pro-black is racist because it could be cultural appropriation or something else. You're just automatically racist, however you choose to relate to black people, because you're not shutting up and listening.
You can't win.
Can't win. No, it's
can't win.
Yeah, I mean, white person is a racist if they hate black people and treat them poorly. They're racist if they love them and treat them nicely.
That's right. That's right.
You can't win. It's a no-win proposition.
I first heard this.
It's a Marxist theory, and the whole thing behind Marxism is fomenting the revolution.
That's all. Right. That's all.
Destroying the structure, fomenting the resolution.
That's right.
Down and starting over with a Marxist point of view. Just like originally critical race or critical theory was to destroy the economic structure. You attack the credibility of the status quo for economic reasons and economic arguments, but now it's a racial issue.
Correct.
Now, what do you brothers think of? I'm in the PCA, as you know, and I'm not sure. Sometimes I wonder if Dr. Anthony.
That's not the politically correct association, right?
Yeah, no. We're I forget what it stands for right now. But the what? It's well, anyways, pretty Calvinistic. So we Presbyterian Church in America, not the PCUSA. Please don't confuse us with the PCUSA. There's a gentleman associated with our denomination named Dr. Anthony Bradley, and he wrote an article not too long ago in which he said the PCA has nothing to worry about from critical race theory, because all you need to do is just eat the meat and spit out the bones.
Sure.
Well,
what?
Go ahead.
This barbecue.
I'm throwing this back on you guys. Well, how would you answer Dr. Bradley?
Papered.
What? Say that again?
Those bones have been sandpapered. That barbecue's already been eaten.
And it's assumed there is meat in there and that the meat isn't spoiled.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in other words, you're saying
it could be rancid.
Not a good take. That's what you're saying. Not a good take.
Barbecue is for you put the sauce over that rancid meat so you can eat it. That's the original origin of barbecue sauce and barbecue period. Rancid meat covered with plenty of tasty sauce.
Wow.
But the deal is that you can't win in this fight, in this argument. I like to tell people my first lesson about race came from my church, and it came in a little song. I was probably 3 or 4 years of age. I still remember it. I can still sing it. I won't sing it. I'll just quote it. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world, red and yellow, black and white. They are precious in his sight. If you ask me, where'd you first learn about the races? I'd say in Sunday school, 3 or 4 years of age. And that little song was the first teaching I had on racism, apart from anything I may have read in the Bible at that age, but still is in my heart and in my mind. And racism is a product of sin, but it's a universal problem. It's on every side of the color divide.
Right. Right. It's not someone has said, and this would be a black preacher, it's not a skin color problem, it's a sin problem. Not a skin problem, a sin problem.
Good point.
And they're right. I want to tell you just a funny story about my son Lee when he was about 5, because we have always just been friends with whoever we're friends with.
Sure.
Ethnicity was never even a question for us, and so he was used to just seeing people. They're just people. We wanted people with integrity, hardworking. I mean, people had the same values that we had, were our friends. And so we were in a hospital visiting Joy's grandmother. She was in the hospital, Rush St. Luke's in Chicago. And I was upstairs visiting, and Joy was downstairs with Lee, and he's playing with this little boy named Chris. Now, Chris was African American, about 4 or 5. And they're just having this great old time. Then they got to talking, and Chris said, why are you here? And she said, well, we're here to see my great grandmother. And she said, and why are you here? And so Chris said, well, my mommy's here to see my daddy, but her skin is a different color. Her skin's like mine. It's different than yours. And Lee stops and he looked straight in his face and he said, you have a black face? I mean, it just never occurred to him to ask that question.
There's significance to that?
Yeah, right. Like, what? So do you have to teach people to be racist? That's my question. And how does CRT fit into that mold?
Yeah.
When we adopted our son from Korea.
It's a racist philosophy. At the heart of CRT is a racist perspective on people.
It's designed. It's designed to do that. It's designed to do that.
Well, our son is from Korea, and when he was very little, like 4, 5 maybe, he was on a playground with another a regular, white kid who's a year or two older than him. And they were talking about parents, and this kid, he said to my son, that guy isn't your dad. He can't be your dad. He doesn't even look like you.
Yeah.
And my wife overheard it, and she was just absolutely, she wanted to, she wanted to do something, but I just said, no, they're just kids. Leave them alone. Well, I don't know. It was about a week later, we were at a McDonald's, and my son says to me as he's eating, he goes, Dad, why don't I look like you? And I just said, well, I mean, he knew he was adopted. We never kept this from. We figured it was going to be a hard thing to keep from him. Eventually, he'd figure it out. And I said, well, because you're from Korea, your ancestors are from Korea, and mine are from Europe. And he goes, oh, okay. And that was it. It was over.
One of the things that comes up is maybe CRT is a big business, sort of like an industrial complex.
You think maybe there's
it could be, and we have a sponsor that speaks to that issue.
Yeah, recently in an emergency meeting at the Toxico Corporation, the project lead Stu said, these protests are delaying the project and killing our bottom line. Foreman Larry says, all this over a few million dead fish. PR spokesperson Pam said, yeah, we're the real victims here. Across town, a hedge fund manager consults with his lawyer. I feel so left out of the culture wars. I can't afford to be left behind. But where do I find the right victim status to bring me the professional success I'm looking for? Meanwhile, Phil is meeting with his career counselor. I've come to the point where I realize I don't have enough intersectionality on my resume. Do you think I should consider gender reassignment surgery to boost my job prospects? Well, now there's a solution for all of these problems. The Grievance Industrial Complex. At the Grievance Industrial Complex, you get the premier manufacturer and recycler of fine grievance products. They provide grievances customized for your political, economic, and social goals. And it works closely with you throughout the design and implementation process to ensure your satisfaction. And all Grievance Industrial Complex products comes with their patented moral high ground. It gives you victim status, identity politics tactics, flawless far left ideology, and so much more, and free for a limited time. You get the book, The Total Moron's Guide to Playing the Victim Card for Terrorists. It's even better than the Harry Potter series, says Dr. S.J.W. Jones. The Grievance Industrial Complex, because things aren't bad enough already. So if you need some more, whatever, intersectionality,
that's
victimhood status, that's where you go.
Okay. Now, we have a serious question, which we rarely get here, or we try to avoid if we can, but a serious question from David Van Beber. Serious question. I teach at Spurgeon College MBTS undergrad program. What can I do to deal with this situation, and how do I combat this issue in the classroom and from behind the pulpit?
I'm really glad he identified this as a serious question. That
I am too. Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't want to be confused. Okay, anybody?
Well, I'll speak to that as former president of MBTS. Address it directly. Now, I don't know what topic exactly David is teaching. There may be in the area of apologetics, which would be easy to slip it into, or into any issue that's pressing for the day. It doesn't matter what you're teaching on. You should address the issue.
Communication, I believe.
Okay, well, yeah. I'd have no problem with David basically explaining what critical race theory is, and that it's not biblical, and here's why it's not.
Correct.
Why you shouldn't support it. And the Bible says quite a bit about race from God's perspective, and none of them would be supportive of CRT, that's for sure. So just if it fits into your exegetical program, you're preaching through the book of Galatians, for instance, you'd have plenty of chance there to speak to it and address it, or other of Paul's epistles and so forth. Philemon, boy, that'd be, preach a sermon on Philemon one Sunday. And a couple of choice texts in the Bible are a great platform for addressing the race question, the race issue, which needs to be addressed. The thing about critical race theory, it basically says you can't change, which is the gospel. 2 Corinthians 5:17, if anyone's in Christ, they are a new creation, which means, you can change, you better change, and you ought to change if you've come to Christ. And that,
and not only that, you are going to change, and here's how we know that. He that has begun a good work in you, and you will continue it until the day of Christ Jesus. So I often have to tell people, look, you do have a choice. You can do it easy or you can do it hard, but rest assured, you're going to do it because it is God doing it to you, not you yourself.
Yeah. So I think any pastor worth their salt ought to preach on the issue from a biblical point of view. It's not, you don't have to take the whole sermon to speak on critical race theory, but you can speak to the racial issue, and you can touch on critical race theory. We're part of the thing about, hey, we don't want to mention critical race theory at the convention was, well, we're afraid that people on the outside will get upset. They're already upset.
Yeah,
exactly.
We're afraid they'll differ with us. They already differ with us.
Right.
We need to tell them why they're wrong and why the gospel is the answer.
But you know what, Phil? The good question is, why were they unwilling to do it? That is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And as we struggled with that, the answers aren't pretty. The question is, do they really differ with them? Yeah. I mean, what was the fear in preaching what the scriptures truly say? For such a time as this, the verse, whenever I talk about critical race theory, I always bring this up: Ezekiel 18:20. The soul whose sins shall die. The son shall not suffer for the iniquity of the father, nor the father suffer for the iniquity of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon himself. It is a different world gospel that says, Ezekiel, you are wrong. Or God speaking in Ezekiel, you're wrong. No, the son will suffer, not only for his father's, but his great-great-great-grandfather's sins. Yeah. And that's a completely different worldview. And we're let me just be honest, because I don't want to come across, I think it's a lot more dire. I think this critical race theory has brought up something that's more dire than I think most of us realize. When Pilate is before Jesus, some people say Jesus before Pilate. I like to say Pilate was before Jesus. When Pilate was before Jesus, in John 18:37, then Pilate said to him, so you are a king? Jesus answers, you say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born. For this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. He says that I believe in conjunction with the Holy Spirit, whose job it is to lead the church and believers into all truth, right?
Right.
If people are getting conned by this, and it ain't even a good con, and they're being deceived from this blatant, vicious lie, the implications of that are not good.
No.
Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
It's not good, Don.
One of the questions that came up, and it kind of piggybacks on something you said earlier, in a sense. How do those on the stage at SBC AM21, in other words, just past convention, not see the irony in there, not even letting Swain, that's Carol Swain, talk? Why are they not acknowledging this, and why are we not holding them accountable?
And now, Don, the answer to that question is a scary one. Not a scary one, but
sobering.
It's not a good answer.
Yeah.
It's not a good answer.
Yeah.
They should see it.
Yeah.
And the question is, why don't they see it?
Yeah.
Can I venture a guess here? I'll be careful.
Yeah.
I think that might be on the part of some people that they believe she's a victim of internalized racism.
Oh, too much whiteness in her life.
She's just internalized her oppression, and she's acting it out. That's what CRT teaches.
Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy.
Is that? Am I going too far with that?
No.
That's maybe their rationale, but
that's too sophisticated.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, basically, they've drunk the Kool-Aid, is what I'm saying.
And the problem is,
would have thought that because they wouldn't have known about it, Don. That's too sophisticated an answer. The issue was they wanted to get this off the table as fast as they could.
Yeah.
And anybody that would threaten to leave the convention, take their church with them.
Oh, okay. So that's the pragmatic answer. I get it.
Pragmatic issue, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, they said, "Hey, we don't want the world to get a bad impression of who Southern Baptists are by being against Christians."
And who's your God at that point?
So it's unity over truth, and worse than that, it's unity for the purpose of projecting an image to the world.
Right.
Well, and that kept coming across from the stage. I mean, it kind of bothered me. James and Phil and I have spoken about this a few times. There were two common statements that came several times an hour, it seems to me, during the convention. One is, the world is watching. Well, what about this? God is watching. What about that one?
Don, what type of person says that? The world is watching and not God is watching.
Somebody who cares about what the world thinks.
PR specialist, a public specialist.
Yeah.
Somebody who cares about what the world thinks more than what God thinks.
And the second one was because there was a lot of, it seemed to me, dissatisfaction. And David Van Beber and James Pittman and I, we've talked about this also, are reflecting some of this dissatisfaction with what's going on at a leadership level, the individuals on the stage. And the second thing that kept coming out from them was repeatedly, "We are here to serve you. You can trust us." After about the 14th time I hear that, I go, no one trusts them. That's why they have to keep telling them.
Thou dost protest too much.
Too much. Well, it occurs to me that depending on the context, and I'm hearing it more and more in this context, a context that leads me to believe that they're reminding me or telling me that the world is watching, because they're implying that I don't care about our testimony and that I would do things that would besmirch our testimony if they didn't remind me, which is really a very thinly veiled accusation against my character. You think I'm going to besmirch the character of Christ before the world because I've just become oblivious to the fact that the world watches what we do.
Yeah, and the irrationality of this is that means that we will tolerate heresy in order to keep a good profile.
Yep.
If we believe that CRT is heretical, which I believe it is, and anti-biblical, we ought to address it. And we ought to address every error in that regard. We can do so in a gracious way without taking on personalities. But we ought to address it forthrightly and firmly, just like you would Mormonism or Jehovah's Witness or Islam or any other manner of worldview that comes against the Christian gospel.
That's right. And one of the verses that is I don't want to say plagued, but has shaped my ministry from youth is Mark 8:38. I memorized it. It's been ingrained on me. And when I understood what Christ was saying, I never let this go. He says this: for whoever's ashamed of me and my words, and this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed of when he comes to glory of his Father with his holy angels.
Wow.
I saw shame on that stage to stand up and to be biblical. And Mark 8:38 again, what type of person is more concerned with the world and how they're viewed by the world as opposed to how they're viewed by their Heavenly Father? The answer is a scary one for them. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people tease Baptists for having so many splits, you know, but those people have never seen the Presbyterian family tree. It looks like a shattered windshield, you know, with all the branches. But you know, I did hear a joke once that said, you know, who was the first Baptist? You know, it was Abraham and Lot when they said, "You go your way and I'll go mine." But you know, we're facing the same deal in the PCA as you are over a slightly different issue, you know. But I'm coming to the conclusion that there's just a point where you come to and you just have to say that we have to part company.
Yes, absolutely.
I know that what's going to happen is the next thing that will happen is a fight over the assets, you know, and who gets custody of what. But you know, that's usually determined by who's in the minority. That's the group that has to leave and start over. But I'm saying sometimes at some point, you know, when you pass resolution, like we have overtures, you have resolutions, and after they get passed, then the fight doesn't end.
Right.
And they start squabbling over verbiage, and you can tell they're not playing fair with it. They're not being straightforward. They're twisting words while accusing you of twisting theirs. This just happened over the past few days with a prominent PCA pastor, and at some point you guys say, you know what? I think we both understand each other's opinion of each other. It's going to be best for if you really care about the watching world, maybe the best thing we could do is like a Paul and Barnabas, where you know you go off and do your thing. We're going to go off and do.
You're being too kind, Ron. I don't think it's a Paul and Barnabas thing here.
It's not a Paul and Barnabas
thing. It's a different gospel. If it's a different gospel, it's not Paul and Barnabas.
I'm just saying they're not going to hear what I really think. You know.
Well, okay. So I want to go back and ask maybe a slightly different kind of a question, because James touched on this, and I think it is also part of the reason why Carol Swain wasn't really brought forth more, and that is because at a core level, CRT is saying whites are superior based on skin color, and non-whites, black, brown, whatever, Asian, are inferior based on skin color, and so
she's a female on top of it.
We need to figure out a way to force whites to allow the inferior colors to
and genders, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, she scored a major intersectionality point by being deplatformed at the national meeting, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. So here's why I'm asking it this way, because I need to clarify this. From a biblical standpoint, well, from an evolutionary standpoint, I have to say, who cares? You have predator and prey. That's all you have. So if my skin color benefits me, that's just too bad for you, non-white. That's evolution at work.
Yeah,
I'm not an evolutionist, right?
Survival of the fittest. What happened to that? Yeah,
that's exactly right. I have a superior position. I can force you to serve me. So too bad. That's evolution at work.
I am so offended.
But from a biblical standpoint, and here's aren't they saying ultimately that God is inferior? He's an inferior deity. Why do I say that? Because God is the one who created the ethnicities.
Yeah.
He confounded the languages. Why? To scatter the people. And how do the ethnicities evolve? They evolve through culture. They evolve through slight physical changes based on where you're living, and those kinds of things all factor in. So aren't they saying, in an ultimate sense, that God is a bad God?
Yeah,
and that's why we're in this problem.
Inferior, maybe not. Do you mean God made a mistake by making races? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me come a little bit to the defense of some of my Southern Baptist brethren. I don't think any of them are directly articulate heretics. They don't understand, perhaps, that when you make a compromise on this kind of an issue, what the implications of it are. And you brought that out very good, Don. But they're not really thinking that way. They haven't thought through what the implications are. And that's the tragedy of it, and that's the danger of it. They don't understand when you do that, you do imply this, but I don't think they're actually thinking it.
So help me out then, because I'm glad that you're helping me out with this, Phil. The thing, if you were talking to a 21-year-old kid, I'd give that to you. Absolutely. These are not 21-year-old kids. These men have been teaching seminaries longer than I've been living.
Right.
These so at the very best, we could say with someone like this is that they're unqualified to be in a leadership position. And because am I right in saying this? Because here's my thing, and here's what was said at the floor. Remember, governors thought it through, and they named critical race theories.
Right.
Congressmen, senators, the world has thought it through. You tell me the church hasn't? You telling me church leaders do not have the level of discernment that Ron DeSantis of Florida, the governor, has?
Yeah.
I mean, are we comfortable saying that? Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, I think that's why a lot of people thought Mike Stone was a better choice for president.
But we lost the vote.
We lost the vote, and a lot of that was politics. You know, there is
What was the percentage? What would you say that?
52 to 48, roughly 52 to 48.
52-48, 300 votes.
300 votes, right? So
12,000 cast or something.
Do you understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying, Phil? I wish it was true, but am I going to start up and say that Ron DeSantis and Mr. Christie Noem, the governor of South Dakota, even Donald Trump, who banned CRT, are we comfortable saying that those people have a better spiritual discernment than the people in the Southern Baptist Convention that's embracing this? Do you see what I'm saying? I struggle with that.
Yeah, and that's a question only they can answer.
Yeah.
You have to say, hey, look, here's the implications theologically and spiritually of what you're doing, what you're saying. Tell us what you're doing, why you're doing this.
Well, there's been a disinformation campaign going on literally for years that I think Vodi Balcom has been fighting against. I was amazed when I stumbled, and I told him this. I talked to him in 2019 at the Founders Conference, which was over here nearby, and I said, you know what? I was trying to wrap my head around all this cultural Marxism and critical race theory, and then I stumbled and I thought, wow, I've discovered all this stuff about Antonio Gramsci and all these people. I thought I was on the cutting edge. Then I find a video. You were into this like 10 years before I ever heard of it, and he'd already researched it out, and so all this stuff that he wrote in Fault Lines, I mean, he's had this down for, I don't know, 15 years. But the disinformation though that you run up against is, like a few years ago they were calling it cultural Marxism. It's a little bit more of an umbrella term, but there was an article written in the New York Times saying cultural Marxism doesn't exist. It's an invention of the right. Well, I already, the time I read that article, I had a bibliography that went back to 1980 of books with cultural Marxism in the title and journal articles with cultural Marxism in the title. But this New York Times article was actually not unusual. People were saying cultural Marxism was an invention of of the alt-right. It was an invention of this. It was an invention of that. No, it's in the scholarly literature. There are major books, textbooks that are written about it. So I sent the list, or I tweeted the list to the author, and he actually tweeted back, "Thank you," but he never retracted the article, you know. And time after time after that, I kept running into it. So you see an outright denial. You had people denying that critical race theory existed, just like Nadler denied that Antifa existed. You know, they just deny it. They deny it.
Phil's trying to get a word in edgewise.
Oh,
I'll say this. 2 years ago, 1% of the American population knew anything about CRT.
Right.
Today,
maybe less.
Yeah. Today, probably 50%.
Yeah.
Talk about people that follow Fox News and other conservative news sources, probably 90%. We just had a school board meeting. 400 people showed up for it. I bet you there weren't 20 in previous school board meetings. And the reason was they were going to hire somebody to help oversee critical race theory. That didn't happen. And I will say this. There's probably leaders in the SBC that didn't understand themselves what they were playing with, that they were playing with fire. And they're now saying, boy, we dodged a bullet on that one. And it's not going to come up again, and it's not going to be dealt with. Now, people say, what about the future of the SBC? There's basically 6 guys in the SBC. You can see all my fingers. 6 guys in the SBC who can answer the question of that, and that's our seminary presidents. If they deal with this in an appropriate way and recognize it for what it is, that's going to go a long way to solving the problem. If they don't, we're in a mess and a world of trouble.
So how is it that they need to be persuaded? Is that a public outcry from SBC churches or something else? Everything.
I think it's individuals, it's churches, it's their trustees asking the right questions. That's why it was thought important to get Mike Stone in there, because he would probably appoint trustees that would be much more aggressive about addressing that issue than someone who would have been a little more accepting of it. Not that they'd not, Ed Litton will tell you he's not for CRT, blah, blah, blah. He's against it. But they realize themselves, I think, at this point, from what I'm reading, what I'm hearing, we dodged a bullet on this one. Let's be careful. I hope that's the case.
What bullet did they dodge? I'm not quite understand. What bullet did they dodge?
The bullet they dodged was letting CRT float and become an accepted position in the convention. They dodged it by the reaction against the 2019 and by the statement of the seminary presidents. I mean, imagine where we'd be today if they didn't do anything. Imagine where we'd be today. There would be a major uprising in the SBC, because churches vote with their feet. They vote with their wallets too.
Yeah.
And there would be a big issue.
Yeah.
There would be a melting iceberg that would be astronomical.
One of the things that I've noticed now, and I'm not a pastor, we're missionaries to cults and non-Christian religions that, as it happens, have to get involved in this sort of stuff from time to time within the church, because you've got false teaching pervading churches. As I've dealt with pastors, I have observed most of them are so overwhelmed by their day-to-day work of being a pastor, taking care of those who are sick, comforting those who are dying, writing their sermons. Pardon?
Preparing sermons, I hope.
Wait a minute.
Preparing sermons.
Them
right. And like James said, it wasn't until 2019 he was just stuck inside the 4 walls of his church. And then when he looked out the window, he goes, what is this stuff everywhere? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Once it hits, then you go, how did this escape my notice? Well, because you're kind of focused on the local ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that is why I would argue churches should either have an elder or somebody in the church who is focused on this kind of stuff, or be in close contact with the ministry like Midwest Christian Outreach, and there's a bunch of them out there, it doesn't have to be us, who are engaged in this, so they can. I get it all the time. I get pastors that email me and I go, okay, someone in my church just said X or is reading this book. What do you know about it? And in like 8 minutes, they'll have an answer that they can go, oh, now I get it, and they know how to address it.
Yeah, with so many great resources, Don, Watchman Fellowship, all these with the internet, there's no excuse for anybody being uninformed, especially a pastor. And part of the pastor's job is to what? Guard the flock.
Yeah.
Guard the flock, number one.
But Don, when I looked out, and I looked, like you said, I looked out the window, I wasn't fooled by it. Like I said, I didn't think it was a good con in the first place.
Right.
I like that.
But anything that happened within the four walls, we could handle. It's just that when I looked out the window, I didn't realize the world was burning outside.
Well,
Does that
right
make
now,
sense?
now, one of the things, and in fact, when I spoke this past Sunday, one of the things I pointed out is this: Paul in Acts 20:28, which Phil alluded to, said to guard the flock from, and it's really from two places: from those coming in from the outside, and from those that are rising up from within. And I said that task is more difficult today, even than it was then, because you have people in your church who are watching, quote, Christian television. I never watch Christian television. There's so much heresy.
I don't think it exists.
Listening to Christian radio, buying books from what are supposedly Christian publishers. And so they're imbibing on heresy very often that you're unaware of until they pop into church and go, I just read this great book. And you go, well, wait a minute, that's heretical, right?
That's true.
It's already in your church. So now we, sadly, because this is great fun, but Ron is going to have to walk us out of here. He could wander because Ron has to wander, so he's going to walk us out of here. Guys, hold on, we're done here, but maybe we want to revisit this at some point in the future. This is a great discussion. So.
Okay, let's give credit to whom credit is due. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil Before Me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage is provided by Armageddon and D Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polygumus. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys is OD Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yo Leg Pulling. Technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham and Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Director of Privacy Assurance is Wiretapping. And original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law. Never, not even once. Okay, so
all right, so all of you can wave. We'll be like the Brady Bunch. Bye.
The Brady Bunch.